Hey guys, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel, and today is Throwback Thursday, the first episode, I guess you want to call it, of my Throwback Thursday series. And again, the idea of the series is to pull out some of the tools or supplies, embellishments, or techniques that I used to use back when I first started, or even, after I'd been going for a while, but just kind of some older ideas, techniques, and things that I used to work with, bring them back, because a lot of them I still have in my drawers, just to kind of pull them out, show them some love again, and revisit some of those things that I used to do all the time that I used to love to do. And so what we're doing today, used to be one of my favorite things to do, and I do still do it every once in a while, but is paper piecing with some stamps and pattern paper. And then some of the other older tools we are using today are colored pencils. I have been coloring with these ever since I started. If I didn't use the colored pencils back in the day, I would just use like a regular scrapbook marker. But you can't shade with these very well. So if I needed to do any shading, I would use the colored pencils. So we also will be using the old Recollections dual tip marker, and then we'll be doing some coloring with a good old sparkly gel pen. We will be using Stickles. Long before I had Nuvo drops, I had like glitter glue or Stickles. This is sprinkled sugar, so it's got some glitter, but it's also like a clear texture. And Decorative edge scissors. How many of you had a big old bundle of these? You used to be, I think you still can, buy like a big old can of them. And I don't know that I ever bought like the big one, but I accumulated a bunch over my early years of scrapbooking, and I actually still have them on top of my desk now because my daughters love to use them. So these stay fresh in my mind quite a bit because they love to use them on all types of projects. But this one kind of just has a little fancy label type border, a fancy scallop type border, and then good old scissors. These never really go out of style. And like I said, we are going to be using some stamps and pattern paper and some coloring to make a little fairy and give her a fun little patterned outfit. So the paper and the stamps I'm working with today are from the Winter Fairy Bundle from Scrapping for Less that they released in January. And the paper, I chose to use this collection for the Smash That Small Paper Pad collaboration with Deb Hawk's Crafty Cottage. And it was the pad I started with in January, and so I'm still working on using that up. This was a card base with a mat that I had already had put together. And so I just decided to pull that out of what I had with my collection and go ahead and use that as my base. And then here, like I said, here is the fairy. I have already stamped her on some white cardstock. And we will be coloring her and adding her little outfit. So what I did is I stamped her on my white cardstock first because she's going to be kind of my base layer. And then I also stamped her out on this pink paper with these tiny white stars just so she could have a patterned dress. I didn't care how well she stamped on there other than the dress part, as long as that was a good stamp. And then I've already gone ahead and used my little cutter bee scissors to fussy cut the dress out, so we didn't have to do that on camera. And same principle, this is just some kind of mint green, seafoam green cardstock, and I stamped the top part of her on there and then fussy cut out her hat. And one other thing I did, I used my marker, I used the brush tip of the marker to go along the edge of my little fussy cut piece here, because when I cut, I did try and leave as much of the black edging as I could, but taking the end, kind of the side of the black marker all the way around, just strengthens up that line, makes it a little bit thicker, and gives it some more distinction. This is, people still use this technique today. I do it all the time. Christy Marcotte does it, and I've seen others as well. So what I'm going to go ahead and do first is some very basic coloring, because back when I started, I didn't do a whole lot of shading. Like I said, sometimes I was coloring with these markers and you can't really shade. But if I did want to do anything a little more advanced, I would use my good old colored pencils. And I've had several sets of colored pencils over the years. These are Prismacolor, and I really love them. They're reasonably priced, and you can get all different kinds of colors in them, and they're good to work with. So like I said, we're going to do some basic coloring. I'm going to start with her skin tone, and this is just this is light peach. So it's almost an imperceptible color. So I'm just going to do her face and neck kind of in a light peach layer first. And we'll get her feet down here. And then I'm going to come back and do just a little bit of shading, but not a whole lot. When you first started, what did you prefer to color with? Were you more of a watercolor person, colored pencils, markers? I know there's other tools that I'm probably not even thinking about. And so I am going to add just a little bit of pink here on her cheeks. And then I'm going to blend that in. I am not an expert colorer by any means. A lot of times I know enough to pretend I know what I'm doing, or to make it look, if you just glance at it, that I know what I'm doing, but that's why you don't see me color on camera very often. Okay, so her skin is done. And next we're going to do her hair, and I'm doing it in a darker brown just so it stands out a little bit better. Because see, you can barely see the peach, which is kind of how it should be. Should have sharpened my pencils. I love her curls. So again, I'm going to do just kind of a light base layer. I always kind of start light and then come back in and darken, just so I can make sure that it gets good coverage. And I've noticed when I'm coloring with colored pencils that when I come back in and go over my area again, I like to go in the opposite direction, because I feel like it looks less grainy that way. Okay, so there's my first layer, and then like I said, I'm going to kind of come in. I'm going to do a couple of darker streaks just to give her a little bit of a highlight, a little bit of dimension in her hair. And then I'm going to go kind of color in a different direction. Not spending a whole lot of time. On the coloring. Even though this used to be like my favorite. Okay. So there's that. And then the last thing that we're going to color with colored pencils is we're going to go over her wings. We're going to add just a little bit of lighter color to her wings. And this is just light pink. Almost has like a peachy look to it, but. And I'm going to take this outer kind of outline of her wings, and I'm pressing down a little bit harder so it's a little bit of a smoother, darker coverage. And then I'm going to go over these like little inner loops just with a really light coat of the same pink. So it's funny because even though my daughter Ellie, who's 9, has her own multiple sets of colored pencils, she still tends to use my pencils. And then she's a hard colorer. Coloring, when I was adding more pressure here on this outline made me think of how she colors with them a lot. So she's a hard colorer. So there's nothing I hate more than sitting down to use my colored pencils for some quick project and they're all like worn down because she doesn't sharpen them. That's just a pet peeve of mine. All right, so then I'm just taking my finger and kind of smoothing it all down a little bit. So, oh, and I think I need to do her shoes. We'll do her shoes with some of this light pink too. Okay. This one you can't really tell that she has skin. Okay, so that is all I'm doing with my colored pencils. You can tell, very basic coloring. So I'm going to use my old gold gel pen, and just to give the star a little bit of shimmer. And this is the star on her wand. I used to color with gel pens a lot too on things like this. Okay, so now we get to give her a little pizzazz here. So I'm just using my art glitter glue and putting just a little bit on her hat. And then I'm going to line up where the hat is on my white cardstock. Press that down. And then I'm going to do the same thing for her dress. And then we'll see if I can get that lined up. So there we go. So not only does it give her pattern on her dress, but it gives her a little bit of dimension as well. And so now I'm going to put my stamp block on that and let that dry for just a bit. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our decorative edge scissors, and I don't like how rough this overlap is right here. And so I want to add like a little white border strip here just to make that transition a little softer. So we're going to use our scissors, and I want to test, is that the way I want it to go? Yeah. So I used to love using these scissors, but the one thing I hate about them is that you can't cut very far before you have to move your scissors along to continue the pattern. That always drove me crazy. And no matter how straight I think I can cut with these, it's never never as straight as I think. So that's what I'm going to add that to my card base. Just like I said, to make that transition a little cleaner. And it gives it a little bit of a fancier edge there. All right, so she should be dry. So I have already pre-cut a piece of that mint green cardstock that I used on her hat. I've already pre-cut that to fit behind my little fairy here. So realize that I'm zoomed in, so not that you really need to see me add adhesive to the back, but we will give her a matting layer just to help her stand out a little bit. And then we're going to add adhesive to the back of both layers so we can adhere that down. And now our card is starting to take a little shape. And I'm actually going to go up a little bit because I want to add a sentiment down there at the bottom. And so I have also, just to save time, I have pre-stamped Happy Birthday onto some light pink cardstock, and this is also part of the one of the Winter Fairy stamp sets. And so I'm going to add a little fishtail. Now, I don't know that back in the day I would have added a fishtail. I probably would have taken some deckled edge scissors or something and cut. But I'm going with fishtail. And then I'm just going to add this down here at the bottom. Okay, so she looks pretty, but we're going to give her just a little bit more pizzazz, and that's where the Stickles comes in. I was actually going to I thought about doing some flocking powder on her, like the fur here on her hat, but I didn't have any white. I have a bunch of other colors, but I didn't have any white flocking powder, so I decided we'll just do the Stickles just to give her some dimension and texture on that fur, on the fur rim, and then the poop ball on the end of her hat. And there we go. And so here's one that I have already done, so you can kind of see how there's a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of dimension on the fur part of her hat. And then the rest of it is similar to what we've already done here. So nothing fancy for this first round of Throwback Thursday, but I did use several techniques that I would, whenever I first started card making. I think she's pretty, and it's a very simple, easy card. And we pulled out some decorative edge scissors, gel pens, colored pencils, an old scrapbook marker, and then some old style Stickles. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and maybe it motivates you to pull out some of these old tools that you used to love and use a lot. And like I said, I still have a lot of this in my stash, and my daughters do use these a lot. So it might be something that even if you don't necessarily pull them out to use, maybe you have a child or grandchild who would love to make some cards and use those, or just craft with them in general. So, but anyway, that is my card using some old school techniques and tools for Throwback Thursday. Stay tuned for next month. We'll pull out some other old tools and supplies and see what we can do. But thank you guys so much for your time today, and I hope you're having a crafty day.